My name is Sophia Hartfield. I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm standing behind a Chinese restaurant in Seattle, looking through their trash bins for leftover food. My stomach hurts from hunger. A fancy lady walks up to me. She's wearing a beautiful purple dress and shiny shoes. "Are you Sophia Hartfield?" she asks me. I'm holding a half-eaten sandwich I just found. My clothes are dirty. My hair is messy. I've been living in my old broken car for 4 months. My ex-husband Mark told me last week, "You'll never find anyone. You're just a homeless nobody now." The fancy lady smiles at me really big. "My name is Linda Park. I'm a lawyer. Your great-uncle just died. He left you $47 million. For months ago everything was different. I lived in a nice house in Bellevue. I was married. I had a college paper that said I was a fashion designer. My ex-husband Mark told me I didn't need to work. He was 35 when we met. He had lots of money and smiled all the time. I was only 22 years old. I had just finished college where I learned to make beautiful clothes. My teacher said I was really good at it. Uncle Walter was the man who took care of me after my mom and dad died in a car crash. He was so happy when I finished college. "You're going to be famous one day," he said to me. "Next year, come work with me in New York. We'll start a big clothing company together." Mark heard Uncle Walter say that. He came over and said my designs were pretty. He asked me to go eat dinner with him. 6 months later, he asked me to marry him. 8 months after that, we got married. Uncle Walter said he wouldn't come to my wedding. "You're making a big mistake," he told me on the phone. "That man doesn't want someone to love. He wants someone to boss around. You're putting yourself in a cage." I was so mad at him. I thought I was smart. I was 22 and sure I knew everything. "You're just jealous because I'm doing what I want," I yelled at him. He said something that stayed in my head forever. "No, I'm sad because you're throwing away all your dreams. But you're a grown-up now. It's your choice to waste your life." We never talked again. Not when I sent him birthday cards. Not when I called him on Christmas. Not when I really needed him later. Mark's control started small and sneaky. He said I should rest before looking for jobs. "Just relax and enjoy being married," he would say. Then he told me not to bother getting my fashion license. Why stress yourself out for no reason? When I tried to make clothes for neighbors from our home, Mark would plan surprise trips to other cities. This made me miss meetings with the people who wanted my clothes. After a while I just stopped trying. The only thing I kept doing was reading fashion magazines and taking online classes about sewing. When Mark went on business trips, I would fill notebooks with clothing designs. Dresses, jackets, pants, shirts. Things I would never make. Things I would never show anyone. Dreams that only lived on paper. I filled 23 notebooks over the years. Mark found them one time while looking for something. "That's a cute little hobby," he said like it was nothing. "But you need to focus on making dinner. My boss is coming over tonight." His mom had Thanksgiving at her big house every single year. She always told people I was Mark's wife who went to school for fashion. She said it in a way that made it sound stupid. Like I had studied how to juggle balls instead of how to create beautiful things. When I found out Mark was secretly dating his young coworker named Brittany, everything fell apart. The divorce was mean and unfair. Mark paid for expensive lawyers. I got a free lawyer who tried his best but couldn't win. We had signed a paper before marriage that said Mark keeps everything he owned before we met. And he owned everything important. The house, the cars, all the money in the bank. I got one suitcase and the knowledge that his lawyers were smarter than mine. Mark's last words to me still hurt. "Good luck finding someone who wants broken leftovers like you." So I started living by collecting cans and bottles to sell. I found old clothes people threw away and sold them on the internet. I rented a tiny storage space for $65 every month. I slept in my car behind a grocery store. I showered at a gym that stays open all night. It wasn't nice, but it was mine and nobody could take it away. Linda pointed at a shiny black car. "Maybe we should talk somewhere nicer and warmer." I looked down at myself. My jeans had holes. My shirt was ripped. I'm too dirty for a fancy car like that. He smiled kindly. You just became the owner of a $50 million business. The car seats can get dirty. It's okay. $50 million. I couldn't understand that number. It was too big. Linda gave me a folder with papers while we drove. Your uncle left you his big house in New York City. His collection of fancy sports cars, buildings in 4 different states, and half of Hartfield Fashion Company. The company is worth about $47 million. I stared at pictures of the beautiful building I'd seen in magazines before. 6 floors of gorgeous design in a fancy neighborhood. There must be a mistake, I whispered quietly. He stopped talking to me 10 years ago. Linda's face looked sad and kind. Mr. Hartfield never changed his will. You were always going to get everything. But there is one rule you have to follow. My stomach felt sick. What rule? She looked right into my eyes. You have to become the boss of Hartfield Fashion within 30 days. And you have to stay the boss for 1 full year. If you say no or if you quit, everything goes to a charity instead. I laughed, but it sounded mean, not happy. I've never worked 1 single day as a fashion designer. I finished school at 21. I got married at 22. My husband thought making clothes was a silly waste of time. Linda's voice was soft and gentle. Mr. Hartfield hoped you would come back to fashion someday. This is his way of giving you another chance. I looked at the folder. At pictures of the life I gave up for a man who threw me in the trash. I'll do it, I said firmly. When do we go to New York? The New York building was so beautiful it made me want to cry. Rosa, Uncle Walter's housekeeper, stood at the front door. She was around 65 years old now. Her hair was gray and white. Her smile was warm like sunshine. Miss Hartfield, I remember you. I took care of you when your parents died. You were 16 and so sad. Welcome home, sweet girl. I remembered her a little bit. A nice woman who made sure I ate food. Who found me crying in Walter's office after my mom's funeral. Your uncle never gave up hope that you'd come back, Rosa said as we walked up the stairs. He built a special workroom for you on the 6th floor 9 years ago. I stopped walking. 9 years ago. But we weren't talking to each other. Rosa's smile was sad. Mr. Walter never stopped believing you'd come home eventually. He said you were too talented to stay hidden forever. He kept this room ready and waiting for when you found your way back. The 6th floor was like a dream for someone who makes clothes. Huge windows with bright sunlight. Big tables for cutting fabric. Expensive sewing machines, the kind that cost thousands of dollars. Drawers filled with colorful thread, buttons, zippers, and fabric. On one wall, my college project was hanging in a nice frame. The evening gown I designed that won first prize. The one Uncle Walter had been so proud of. I touched it gently. Tears filled my eyes. The fabric was a little faded, but the stitching was still perfect. He'd kept it for 10 whole years. The first big meeting was exactly as mean as I thought it would be. 10 senior employees sat around a shiny table. All of them looked at me like I didn't belong there. A man around 55 years old named Henderson leaned back in his chair. He looked grumpy. With all respect, Miss Hartfield has never worked 1 day in fashion. This decision shows Walter wasn't thinking straight before he died. I pulled out one of my 23 notebooks. Actually, Mr. Henderson, my uncle was thinking perfectly straight. He knew this company needed new ideas. Not the same old people doing the same old things while the world changes around them. I pushed the notebook across the table. This is a dress collection I designed 4 years ago while my husband was away on a trip. Recycled fabrics, natural dyes, clothes that don't hurt the environment. I have 22 more notebooks just like this one. 10 years of designs I made in secret because my ex-husband thought fashion was a silly hobby that stopped me from cooking his dinner. Henderson flipped through the pages. His face didn't show his feelings, but other people at the table leaned closer to look. A woman named Sandra spoke up. Even if your designs look nice, running a company needs business skills, talking to customers, managing projects. You don't have real experience with any of that. He nodded. You're completely right. That's why I'll ask for lots of help from everyone already working here, especially from David Miller. I looked at the senior employee who'd been sitting quietly, just watching and listening. I'm not pretending I know everything. I'm here to learn, to lead, and to make my uncle proud while bringing fresh ideas. If you can't handle working for someone who wants to move forward instead of staying comfortable doing the same old thing, you can leave right now. My first big test came 3 weeks later. The Morrison Project was a fancy fashion show in Los Angeles. We were making clothes for a famous movie star. Everything needed to be perfect, special, exactly what Hartfield fashion was known for. I'd spent 4 weeks designing the dresses with our seamstresses. The clothes would tell a story. Flowing fabrics that moved like water. Colors that changed from blue to green depending on the light. Hand-sewn crystals that sparkled like stars. At 10 o'clock on presentation morning, I walked into my locked office and found all my fabric samples missing. Henderson appeared in the doorway holding my sample bag. Found this in the hallway. Someone must have dropped it there. I opened the bag. My heart sank to my feet. The fabric samples were cut into tiny pieces. Ribbons destroyed. The color swatches mixed up and labeled wrong. I had 20 minutes before the meeting started. I had to make a choice. Panic and cancel. Admit I failed. Or do what Walter would have done. Actually, I said, closing the bag with a confident smile. Let's do this in a different way. Miss Morrison, you said you wanted clothes that tell your story. Let me tell you that story right now. I walked to the whiteboard and started drawing with colored markers. My hand moved smoothly because I'd practiced secretly for 10 years. I drew the dress shapes. I explained how each piece was inspired by the ocean, which Miss Morrison grew up near. How every stitch had a purpose and meaning. Most fashion treats clothes as simple things you wear, I said, sketching tiny details with markers David handed to me. But your collection will be alive with meaning. In bright lights, the sequins will shine like sun on water. In dim lights, the fabric will flow like waves at night. The pattern on each dress is based on real wave movements from the Pacific Ocean near your childhood home. By the time I finished 50 minutes later, the whiteboard was covered in drawings and notes showing my complete vision. Raw, honest, filled with real passion you could feel. Morrison stood up and walked close to the board, studying every detail. This is exactly what I wanted. Someone who understands that clothes can tell stories. When can you start making these? After they left, having signed a contract immediately, David was smiling huge. That was amazing. But someone destroyed your samples on purpose. This was sabotage. He nodded. I know. It doesn't matter though. Henderson wanted me to fail. Instead, I showed everyone I don't need fancy samples. The ideas speak for themselves. That night, I called an emergency meeting with Linda there as my lawyer. Our security cameras had caught Henderson cutting up my fabric samples in his office. He quit his job the next morning. The company bought his 25% ownership for fair price. But the real surprise came when Rosa found a blue leather book hidden behind Walter's fashion magazines. Your uncle wrote in this diary. Many pages are about you. The diary covered 16 years. From when I first came to live with him until weeks before he died. One entry made me freeze in place. March 20th, 10 years ago. Sophia married Mark Foster today. I refused to go to the wedding. Rosa says I'm being mean and stubborn. Maybe she's right. But I can't watch someone I raised walk into a prison with her eyes wide open. All I can do now is wait and pray she finds her way back to herself. Another entry from 9 years ago. Started building the design studio on the 6th floor today. Rosa thinks I'm silly making a space for someone who might never come home. But I need to believe she will return. The studio is my way of showing faith in her. The last entry, written 6 weeks before he died. I'm dying faster than the doctors thought. The pain is bad, but I'm at peace. Linda knows to find Sophia after I'm gone. The rest is her choice. She'll either take the challenge or make her own path. Either way, she'll be free from that man. That's all I ever wanted for her. The Hartfield Scholarship started 4 months after I became boss. We picked 15 students from 400 people who applied. We gave each one $40,000 per year plus help paying for their apartment. Maria Santos was 23, designing clothes for plus-size women that made them feel beautiful. My family didn't understand why I wanted to make clothes instead of being a doctor, she told me nervously on her first day. I smiled warmly. Let me guess. They said it was a nice hobby but not a real job that makes money. She nodded, looking relieved someone understood. Because people who don't understand passion will always try to make it seem small, I said. My ex-husband spent 10 years telling me my college degree was a cute waste of money. Don't let anyone make you feel tiny for dreaming big dreams. The program was hard work. But by December, Maria's plus-size dress designs had caught attention from a big store in Chicago. They wanted Hartfield to make the clothes, with Maria as the main designer with help from experienced people. 7 months later, Thomas Wu, the boss of a rival fashion company, made a surprise offer. I'll pay $280 million to buy Hartfield Fashion completely. The senior employees gathered in the meeting room. Sandra presented all the details of his offer. Since you own 52% of the company, the final choice is yours, Sophia. I didn't even pause to think. No. Walter didn't leave me this company so I could sell it to someone who represents everything he fought against his whole life. Sandra smiled big. That's exactly what we hoped you'd say. Walter put a special rule in his will. If you rejected any big offer to buy the company, you'd get an extra gift he set up. $25 million with no rules about how to use it. For understanding that some legacies can't be bought with money. She handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a necklace. A simple silver chain with a tiny sewing needle pendant. The note said, Sophia, this necklace belonged to your great-grandmother Clara. She was a seamstress in the 1940s when women were told to stay home and have babies. She faced challenges you can't imagine. But she never gave up on her vision. Create bravely. Live boldly. Never let anyone make you small again. I'm so proud of you, my dear girl. That evening, David found me in the studio working on sketches. He pulled out a small box from his pocket and opened it carefully. Inside was a simple gold ring with a tiny diamond. Sophia Hartfield, I'm not doing this because of any timeline or test or business reason. I'm doing this because every single day with you is better than the day before. I want a whole lifetime of days watching you change the world with your beautiful creations. Will you marry me? I looked at the ring. Then at David. Then at the studio Walter had built 9 years ago, hoping I'd return someday. Yes, I said through happy tears. Absolutely yes. 1,000 times yes. The wedding happened 20 months after I'd been digging through that trash behind the Chinese restaurant. Sandra walked me down the aisle in Walter's rooftop garden. David's promises to me were simple and beautiful. Sophia, you taught me that real partnership means celebrating each other's strengths, not competing to see who's better. I promise to always see you for who you truly are. To challenge you. To believe you can do impossible things. My promises to him were harder to say without crying. David, 20 months ago, I was completely sure nobody would want me. That I was broken beyond any repair. You didn't just prove that wrong. You helped me understand I was never actually broken. I was just waiting to find someone who saw my scars as places where light could shine through. We used the $25 million gift to start a project all across America. We made beautiful clothes for people who couldn't afford expensive fashion. Prom dresses for poor students. Interview suits for people looking for jobs. Wedding dresses for brides with no money. We designed with the same care usually saved only for rich people. Maria led the design for the Atlanta Community Fashion Center. Her first big project as head designer. 6 years after taking over Hartfield, I gave a speech at my old college for students graduating. When I graduated, I had a degree, a dream, and total certainty about my future. Within 1 year, I'd given up all of it for a man who needed me to be small and quiet. For 10 years, I disappeared into a life that wasn't really mine. But here's what I learned that I want to share with you today. You can't actually lose yourself permanently. You can misplace yourself for a while. But your real self stays inside, waiting patiently for you to remember who you truly are. That evening, I went back to the rooftop where this new chapter of my life began. David was in the studio working on sketches for a children's clothing line in Miami. Rosa had dinner ready and waiting, still taking care of me after all these years. I stood in Walter's garden looking at the city spread out below. So many buildings filled with people who had dreams and determination. I thought about the woman who'd climbed out of that dumpster behind the Chinese restaurant. The woman who believed she'd lost everything that mattered. I wished I could go back in time and tell her the most important thing she needed to hear. She was already everything she needed to be. She just needed time, space, and love to remember it. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt small, dismissed, or written off by people who should have loved you, drop a comment sharing your own comeback story and subscribe to Women's Revenge. Because transformation isn't something that happens once and you're done. It's a daily choice to build yourself back up stronger than you were before. You're already everything you need to be. You just need to remember that truth.